I had always thought that my relationship with Mark was perfect. We had been together for over 2 years, and in that time, we had faced some tough challenges, but we always managed to work things out. There was an undeniable chemistry between us, and I thought that was all we needed to make it work. We laughed together, supported each other, and even when things got difficult, we'd find our way back to each other. I truly believed we were meant to be. Mark was a kind and caring person, someone who always tried to make me feel safe and loved. He had this charm about him that drew people in, and I was no exception. When we met, I was in a phase of my life where I wasn't looking for anything serious, but Mark made it hard not to fall for him. He was thoughtful and affectionate, always looking out for me in ways I never knew I needed. He made me feel special, and I didn't realize how much I depended on his validation until much later. At first, he never had an issue with my male friends. He knew I had them before we got together, and he even met a few of them in the beginning. There were no red flags, everything seemed fine. I always made sure that our relationship was my priority, and I worked hard to maintain a balance between my time with him and my friendships. I had known most of these guys for years, and they were important to me. Some of them had been there for me through tough times, long before Mark came into my life. But as time passed, things began to change. It was subtle at first, little comments here and there about how much time I was spending with my friends. He would ask if I could spend more time with him instead of going out with them. I always brushed it off, thinking it was just a normal insecurity that every couple faces. I reassured him time and time again that he was my priority, that I would never do anything to hurt him. I assumed that would be enough. Then came the night of the party. We had gone to a mutual friend's birthday celebration. The kind of party where everyone is a little tipsy, everyone is laughing, and the atmosphere is lighthearted. I was standing in the living room, talking to a couple of my male friends from work, when Mark came up to me with a half-joking smile. He looked at me, then at my friends, and in front of everyone he asked, "So, would you ever unfriend them if I asked you to?" I was caught off guard. I knew he had mentioned his discomfort with my friendships before, but this felt like an odd question, almost like a joke. I could feel the eyes of our friends on me, waiting for my response. In that moment, I didn't think too hard about what I was saying. I replied with a laugh, trying to ease the tension, "I can't unfriend my male friends." I thought it was a harmless comment, nothing more than me being honest about my boundaries. Mark didn't laugh. He went silent, his face unreadable. The energy in the room shifted, and I immediately realized I had said something wrong. But it wasn't until later that I saw the full effect of my words. Mark became distant, colder, and I could tell something had changed. He didn't bring it up again that night, but the next morning, when we were alone, he confronted me. "What did you mean by that last night?" he asked, his tone sharp. "You can't unfriend them? So, that means you'd choose them over me, right?" I was stunned. "No, Mark. That's not what I meant. I was just saying I can't erase my past. I value those friendships. But you're the one I'm with now. I'm not going anywhere." But he wasn't convinced. His face tightened, and his voice lowered. "I don't know, Sophie. I don't know if I can trust you after that. It's like you're telling me I don't matter." That was the first time I realized how deeply his insecurities ran. And just like that, everything I thought was perfect began to unravel. I didn't understand how a simple, honest statement could shift the dynamic so quickly. But there it was, his trust in me, the foundation of our relationship, suddenly felt fragile. The tension between Mark and me didn't subside after that night. If anything, it only grew worse. The morning after the party, Mark was distant, barely speaking to me as we ate breakfast together. His silence was deafening, and I could feel the weight of his unspoken thoughts pressing down on me. I tried to reach out, to make him understand that my loyalty was still to him, but he didn't seem to hear me. For the next few days, things felt off. Mark stopped initiating conversations, and when we did talk, it felt like there was always an underlying judgment in his words. I noticed how his eyes would flicker to my phone whenever I got a message from one of my male friends, a look of unease creeping across his face. I had always known that Mark was a little insecure, but now, his insecurities seemed to consume him. He started asking about every interaction I had with my friends, even questioning why I had certain friends at all. At first, I thought it was just a phase, maybe he was just having a bad week or something, but as the days went on, I realized this wasn't something he was going to just let go of. He began to bring up my friendships more and more. One night, after dinner, he asked, "Do you really think it's normal to have so many male friends?" I was taken aback by the question. "What do you mean by normal, Mark?" "They're my friends, just like anyone else. I've known them for years. I don't know. It just feels off. I don't think I can keep doing this if you're not going to make a choice." His voice had a finality to it that left me stunned. "Make a choice? Mark, I've already chosen you. You're the one I'm with," I said, my voice shaking. But he wasn't listening. Instead, he stood up, walked away, and left me there, sitting in the quiet of our living room, wondering how we had gone from laughing together at parties to arguing over my friends. The next few days were a blur of awkward silences and forced conversations. It was like we were both walking on eggshells around each other, afraid to say the wrong thing that might push us further apart. But every time I tried to reach out, every time I attempted to explain myself, he seemed to pull away more. I couldn't understand it. Why couldn't he see that my friendships had nothing to do with my love for him? Then, one evening, things took a turn I wasn't prepared for. We were having dinner at a small restaurant when Mark suddenly dropped the bomb. "I don't think I can trust you anymore," he said, his voice flat, as if the words didn't mean anything to him anymore. I froze. "What do you mean, you can't trust me? You said you couldn't unfriend your male friends, Sophie. And now I'm questioning everything. Maybe I'm just not the right guy for you." His words stung more than I could have imagined. I can't keep being with someone who doesn't understand why I feel the way I do. I need someone who puts me first. His words cut through me like a knife. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. How did we go from being happy together to this? Was it really just one comment that had done all of this? I tried to keep my voice steady, but I felt my heart racing. "Mark, please. It's not about them. It's about us. Why can't you see that?" But he was already too far gone, his mind made up. The man I loved, the man I had shared so much with, had now turned his back on me, all because of a misunderstanding. And as I sat there, staring at the man who had been my world, I felt the crushing weight of losing something I thought was unbreakable. The days that followed Mark's ultimatum were some of the hardest of my life. I tried to reach out, tried to fix things, but every time I approached him, it felt like I was walking into a wall of coldness. He became more distant, more withdrawn. His silences were longer, and his words were sharper. I began to feel like I was losing him, but I wasn't sure how or why. The more I tried to explain, the more it seemed like I was digging myself deeper into a hole. I thought back to everything we'd shared, all the moments that made me believe our relationship was solid. Had I really messed it up with just one comment? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. It wasn't as if I was doing anything wrong. I had always been open and honest about my friendships, never hiding anything from him. But now, everything I said seemed to fall on deaf ears. He no longer looked at me with affection or love. Instead, his gaze was filled with doubt and suspicion. The tension built up to a breaking point one evening. I had invited a few of my friends over for a casual get-together, a small dinner where we could talk and unwind. Mark had refused to come, choosing to stay in his room and avoid the situation altogether. I didn't know if it was because of my friends or just because he didn't want to be around me at all. But either way, I felt the distance between us growing by the second. As my friends left that night, I noticed something strange. Mark's phone was sitting on the kitchen counter, face up. I didn't want to snoop. I didn't think I had any reason to. But something inside me nagged at me, and against my better judgment, I picked it up. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but my curiosity got the best of me. I unlocked his phone and saw something that made my heart stop. There, in his messages, were multiple conversations with one of his ex-girlfriends, and the messages were flirtatious, even suggestive. My hands shook as I read through the exchanges. Why hadn't he mentioned this to me? Why hadn't he been open about it? My mind raced with a million thoughts, all of them leading to the same place. He had been hiding something from me this whole time. I put the phone back down, my stomach sinking. I didn't know what to think anymore. Was this the reason he had been pulling away? Had he found someone else? Had he been doubting our relationship from the start? I waited for him to come out of his room, but when he did, it wasn't with an explanation. He simply walked past me, his face hard, avoiding eye contact. He didn't even ask how my night went. That was when I knew, this wasn't just about my friends. It wasn't just about one comment or one misunderstanding. Something deeper was going on. Maybe Mark wasn't the man I thought he was. Maybe I had been blind to the signs, too caught up in the idea of us, to see that he was pulling away for reasons I hadn't been able to comprehend. I walked into the living room, my heart heavy, and sat down on the couch. He followed me a few minutes later, but there was no apology, no attempt to make things right. Instead, his eyes were cold, distant, like he was already somewhere else. And in that moment, I realized that we were no longer the same couple that had once laughed together without a care in the world. Something had shifted, and we were both too stubborn to admit it. As I sat there, the weight of everything began to hit me. I had been fighting for something that wasn't even real anymore. Mark's trust in me had shattered, and I was left with nothing but the remnants of what used to be a love I thought would last forever. The air between Mark and me had grown unbearably tense, and the quiet in our apartment felt suffocating. Each day felt like walking through a thick fog, neither of us willing to break the silence. I had tried to reach out countless times, hoping that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other, but each attempt had been met with cold indifference. I couldn't stand the way things had become. The distance, the mistrust, it was eating me alive. Then, one evening, I couldn't hold it in anymore. After a week of avoiding the issue, I decided that enough was enough. I had to know the truth. I had to confront him, face to face, and get to the bottom of what had been slowly unraveling our relationship. I found him sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him, my heart beating fast in my chest. It felt like everything was building up to this moment. "Mark," I said, my voice shaking slightly, but I knew I had to be firm. "We need to talk." He didn't look at me, just continued to stare at the screen. "About what?" he muttered. I stepped closer, forcing myself to look him in the eye. "About everything. About what's been happening between us. About why you've been so distant. And about why you haven't been honest with me." His eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time in days, I saw a hint of something, guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was quickly masked by the same coldness I had grown accustomed to. He sighed and finally turned off the TV. "I don't know what you want me to say," he said quietly, his voice flat. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Sophie." The words stung like a slap across the face. I had heard them before, but hearing them from him in that moment felt like a gut punch. I fought to hold back the tears, but they threatened to spill over. "You can't trust me?" I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Why? Because I have male friends? Because I said I couldn't unfriend them? Is that really why you're doing this?" He looked away, his hands clenched into fists. "It's not just that, Sophie. It's everything. It's how you don't understand why it bothers me. It's how you keep acting like it's nothing. It's like you're not even trying to see things from my side." I could feel the frustration rising inside me. I have always been open with you, Mark. I've never hidden anything. You know that. My friends, male or female, are a part of my life. That doesn't change how I feel about you. But you keep twisting things, making it seem like I'm doing something wrong. He stood up then, pacing in front of me, his voice rising with anger. You don't get it, do you? I don't feel like I'm enough for you anymore. You're always talking to them, always spending time with them. It's like you don't need me. Like I'm just some afterthought in your life. I felt my heart break at his words. Mark, that's not what this is about. You are enough for me. You always have been. But I can't change who I am or who my friends are. If that's what you need from me, then maybe we're not as compatible as I thought. He stopped in his tracks, looking at me, his face a mixture of anger and pain. For a moment, there was silence between us, the weight of everything hanging in the air. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Sophie, he said finally, his voice quieter now. I can't keep wondering if you're lying to me or if I'm just not enough. I need someone who can make me feel secure. His words hit me like a tidal wave, crashing over me, dragging me under. I had never imagined it would come to this raw, painful truth. I had been trying so hard to make things work, but now I realized that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, the damage is done. The trust is broken, and there's no going back. I stood there, my heart heavy, as Mark walked past me, leaving me standing alone in the living room, facing the shattering reality of what we had become. I spent the next few days in a daze, unsure of what to do or where to turn. The confrontation with Mark had left me emotionally drained, and I couldn't escape the feeling that everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, was slipping through my fingers. Our relationship, which once felt like a solid foundation, had now become something fragile, easily shattered by misunderstandings and insecurities. I couldn't help but wonder if it was too late to repair the damage we had both caused. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, questioning myself, doubting my decisions. Had I really done something wrong? Had I been so blind to his feelings that I had pushed him away? I was consumed by guilt, but at the same time, I felt a sense of relief. At least, now, the truth was out in the open. The walls of silence had been broken, and we both knew where we stood. But just as I thought I had lost everything, something unexpected happened. I was at work one afternoon, mindlessly scrolling through my phone during a break, when I saw a message from Mark. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I hesitated. Should I open it? Should I even respond? I wasn't sure if I was ready to face him again, especially after everything that had been said. But I clicked on the message, my fingers trembling. Sophie, can we talk? Please. I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. I hadn't expected this. I had prepared myself for the worst, for him to walk away for good, but here he was, reaching out. I took a deep breath and, with a sense of cautious hope, I replied. Of course. When? He suggested meeting later that evening at the small cafe near our apartment. I agreed, not knowing what to expect, but hoping that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. That evening, as I walked into the cafe, I felt a mix of anticipation and fear. I had no idea how this conversation would unfold. Would he accuse me again? Would he finally admit that he had been hiding things from me? Or would this be the end of everything? Mark was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, looking uncharacteristically nervous. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time, vulnerability. He stood up as I approached, and we both hesitated for a moment before sitting down. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, Mark began, his voice quiet. I know I pushed you away, and I know I made you feel like you weren't enough. I'm sorry for that. I was taken aback by his words. For the first time in what felt like forever, Mark was taking responsibility for his actions. He wasn't blaming me, he wasn't accusing me of anything. He was simply acknowledging the hurt he had caused. I've been thinking about it too, I said softly. And I know I wasn't perfect either. I should have been more understanding, more patient. But I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted you to feel like I was prioritizing my friends over you. There was a long pause as we both took in what we had just said. It felt like a weight was being lifted, slowly but surely, as we allowed ourselves to be honest with each other. I don't know what the future holds, Mark said finally, his eyes searching mine. But I want to try. I don't want to lose what we have. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized that, despite everything that had happened, there was still a chance for us. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be perfect, but it was a chance. And that, for now, was enough. We'll figure it out, I whispered, my voice shaky. Together. And for the first time in days, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild the trust we had lost. The road ahead would be uncertain, but we were willing to walk it side by side.